Okay, Matt Pressman here from Florida Tennis Magazine. Exciting to have Justin Roethlingshoefer here with me. He's a performance coach, works mostly with hockey players, but also athletes and CEOs and corporate executives of all kinds. Has an incredible background, lived the dream, went as a junior hockey player up to the pro ranks, and then stayed in the sport. Has incredible advice to give our community in the tennis world about recovery, about fitness, about nutrition, about all the steps it takes to have that journey from a junior player up to the professional ranks. And even for guys like me who are senior players, just some good tips and tricks and biohacks, because we're here at the Biohacking Conference to learn more. So anyway, so Justin, welcome.
It's so great to be here. I appreciate you.
Awesome. So let me start here. How did you get started as an athlete? And did you just play hockey as a junior player, or did you
really good question.
Sports?
Yeah, so I grew up playing every sport possible.
Okay.
I was multidisciplinary. My father put me in literally everything. So from soccer to hockey to baseball to golf to you name it. And so I've always just been interested in athletics. And to be honest, I started skating at the same time I started walking. So it was growing up in Northwest Canada, that was kind of the thing. So I've always been into sports. The biggest thing that kind of came with this though was I was always the fat kid. So it was always the fat kid. And as I went through my journey being the fat kid, I obviously had a deep learning curve and a deep interest in strength conditioning and some of the data that came along with that. I just became infatuated with it.
Okay.
On that same note, the fat kid became the anorexia kid because really just had this major issue with body dysmorphia and this fear of what I was made fun of and what I was made fun of doing. At that same time, I became infatuated with realizing that, man, your body doesn't know the difference between mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress. Like all of these things are integrated, and you actually have to look at health in a holistic way. It's not just what you look like on the outside, but what's happening on the inside. And so that set the stage for me to come down to the States on a hockey scholarship. I ended up doing 2 undergraduate degrees, my master's degree, and then postgraduate doctoral research in sleep and recovery. And that really propelled my career into the National Hockey League as a health and performance specialist that was helping these athletes get hyper-personalized in their own health and performance in an integrated way. So it wasn't just, hey, what workout do I do? It wasn't just, hey, how do I recover well? It wasn't just, hey, how do I sleep better? What supplements should I take? It's, let's look at everything. Let's get your mental performance coach involved. Let's get your strength coach involved. Let's get your nutritionist involved. Let's get the medical team involved so that we can treat you as an individual. And that's how we maximized results.
So great. Let's back up a little bit because first of all, tennis players, just like hockey players, tend to be a little OCD.
Yeah.
We all have our issues. We all go through a lot. We are so dialed into how to get our performance up to the maximum level. Mm-hmm. Now, as a junior hockey player making it to the college ranks, let's just start there. That's an incredible feat. I mean, there's so many guys that are trying to do that. What does it take to become a, sort of high-level junior hockey player and then getting to the college ranks and being able to get into college on a scholarship, no less?
Yeah, my father said something to me at 12 that changed my whole perception of this. And he said, son, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid. And it hit home because, again, I was a talented young athlete, could have chose a couple different sports, but it was the consistency in which I loved to do things with, the consistency of which I showed up for practice, the consistency of which I showed up for games, the consistency of which I ate, the consistency of which I slept, the consistency in which I trained, the consistency just in which I lived. And so I think we overlook the power of consistency often, and we're looking for that next quick fix or that next best thing, when in actuality, what we can control is how are we showing up daily? What's the mindset in which we show up with? What's the decision-making process we show up with? And ultimately, what's the habits and behaviors that we show up with?
Well, I want to also go back because it's so fascinating, actually having dealt with anorexia, yet still making it to become a college athlete. So let's talk a little bit about that. Yeah. So number one, that was, obviously a difficult thing to get through.
Yep.
But you must have had some other habits that got you above the competition. So even in the face of anorexia, what was it that got you there?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And when I go back to that time, so let's go back to Justin aged 13, 14 to about 18.
Okay.
And that's the height of anorexic years.
Okay.
And when you talk about OCD, like OCD behaviors off the wall, and I'll give you some examples. I couldn't go up a flight of stairs, without going up and down 5 times as fast as I can. I couldn't go through a door frame and not do 10 push-ups. I couldn't pick books up out of my locker without doing 10 squats first. I wasn't allowed in my mind to walk in my school. I had to run. So all of these things, like you can imagine at 13 to 18, like you're the weird kid. Like stay away from me.
You should run a Navy SEAL.
Yeah,
you were doing your own Navy SEAL training.
Like just the weird kid. At night,
Crazy.
I transferred my bedroom from where it was on the main floor to the basement because the basement was cold and dark. And so I was sleeping in a colder temperature. I would take my sheets off and I slept naked. I would have to take a cold shower before I went in. All these things because it burnt calories more.
Okay.
And so you look at this. This had nothing to do with healthy behaviors. This was far beyond healthy behaviors. These were all very negative. I say all of that to tell you that Justin at 12 years old was 140 pounds and Justin at 16 pounds was 90. And that's a skin and bones scrawny 90. I will tell you the thing that saved my life, the thing that changed my life was a coach that I had come into my life and who coached me at 12 and then happened to be my coach at 16. And when he walked into the room, he knew who I was because I obviously played for him at 12. When he walked into the room, he had seen me on the ice behind the mask.
Right.
And when he walked into the room to come and say, hey, we're selecting you for the team, he walked in, he walked out.
Right.
He went to the next room, he walked in, he walked out. And he said, hey, does anybody know where Justin is? He said, yeah, he's in dressing room 1. He walked in, he walked out. He said, no, he's not in there.
Wow.
And he came back in and the guy pointed to him and he pointed to me and I was like, hey, Carl, what's up? And he was like I could visibly tell he was shocked in a negative way. And so going back to how did I get there and how did I continue to be able to perform, it's just the grace of God. It's literally to be honest, I do not know. Because there was days and practices where I was skating up and down and I was crying underneath my mask because I was exhausted. I had no energy left. I would wake up in the morning in pain, like my joints would ache. And this is a 16-year-old boy. Just because of this. And so it is literally the grace of God. And at 16, as Carl mentored me through, he really changed my entire habit set. Now I will tell you, because I was so malnourished, because I was so obsessed and so far one direction, that as soon as I started to do the right things, as soon as I started to eat, because training was an issue, as soon as I started to eat, as soon as I started to fuel myself, as soon as I started to sleep, I gained weight very quickly. I gained lean muscle mass very quickly. And I became extremely strong. And from 16 to, let's call it 18, 19, my body completely transformed for the positive. And that's what really allowed me to get propelled in that direction.
It's a fascinating story. And I also want to go from how you went from college to pro. That's just also something of interest. But let's go back a little bit. This is a tough thing for a lot of junior tennis players, is the fact that that obsessive personality, practicing constantly, going the extra mile, almost overworking yourself is what makes you stand out and kind of lift yourself above the competitors oftentimes. But then there's burnout. And then there's sort of issues that come with that as well. What would you tell sort of junior athletes who are really trying to stand out, working harder than everybody else? Because, you put the work in and you get the results. But on the other hand, not going too far. How do you find that balance?
It's such a great question. And I have a saying now. I would say this to our athletes all the time and to my guys is, you're not overtrained, you're under-recovered.
And interesting.
It is very, if you are properly recovering if you are putting the same focus, the same emphasis, the same intentionality, the same push, and the same drive to recover yourself,
fascinating,
you'll never overtrain yourself.
Okay.
And so what I had to do is I had to take the same vigor, the same attention, the same motivation,
focus,
that I had for pushing myself and stressing my body in whether it was training, whether it was practice, whatever it was, to now recovery, so that I could be as present there. So all of a sudden I became the guy that focused all on the sleep habits. I was in bed at a certain time. I was doing certain things at night. I was the guy that was making sure I was getting in the sauna and doing my contrast therapy. I was the guy who was stretching. I was the guy who was doing these things and focusing on quality food. I was the guy who was doing these things that were uncool, that nobody wanted to do. And that's the way that you stood out. I was the guy doing the 40-minute cool down at the end of a practice, that would ride the bike for 5-10 minutes and then would stretch for 10-15, then would do the breath work and the meditation. That's how he all of a sudden stood out, because man, not only does the guy show up and practice and play hard, not only does he train hard, but the guy recovers hard. Like, my gosh, like what else do we need from this guy?
Yeah, you're doing it.
And so that's where you come back to this concept of you cannot overtrain a well-recovered lifestyle. And people try to find this balance, and they're chasing this balance when balance never existed to begin with. All you have to do is recover as hard as you train.
That's a great piece of advice. I love it. Wonderful observation that you made about yourself, especially during this time as a junior, then to college. Let's move from college player to going pro. And this is like the dream. This is like, it's like hitting the lottery, as an athlete. What is that like? How did you do it? How did you, again, make yourself stand out now? Same thing from going as a junior player to a college player, then a college player to a pro. What did you do to put yourself above the competition to get that to that level?
So I'm obviously not the biggest guy. I'm not the fastest guy. I'm not the most talented.
Well-built guy.
I'm strong.
I'm strong.
But what I will say is nobody will outwork me.
Got it.
And I am also, I say this, but I'm also just a locker room guy, a fun guy to be around. I'm a great teammate. I will always encourage you. I'm a person that's going to like make things lighter. I'm a guy that's going to, you don't have to question if Justin's going to show up today. You know what you're going to get out of Justin.
Right.
And so it literally goes back to what my dad said at 12. Consistency will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid.
Yeah.
And why I ultimately got an opportunity, even why I went to college, like even why I got an opportunity in college, was just because they knew what they were going to get from me on a day-to-day basis was not going to change. And they knew that I could be a leader. Like I was a captain in college. I was a captain of my junior team. And I was a leader in every locker room I was in. Not because I was the best, but simply because of how I lived my life.
Right.
The habits I had, the behaviors that I had, the fact that I trained hard, the fact that I recovered hard. And when you do that, my gosh, you stand out so much.
Yeah.
One of my mentors said to me the other day, he goes, and he's talking about business here, but business and athletics, very, very similar.
Agreed. Yeah.
So when you come in, he was talking, he goes, do you want to know how you become world class? You want to know how you stand out above everything else? Just be excellent.
Yeah.
Just be excellent. Excellent what you do. Pay attention to the little details. And I know people say this in, but there's no context to it.
Right.
They'll say, the details matter. They'll be giving you a speech and you might not follow through. The little details, come on, finish through on that. Or you'll run through a ball. Maybe you're drilling a ball at the net and you go and you'll just get your racket on it and have no idea where the ball is going, but you are like, hit my racket, great, and I'm running back now to get the next one. No, finish through on that.
Yeah.
Get the little details. The little details matter. Yeah. If you focus on the little details, then all of a sudden you're going to stand out, because my gosh, did you see what Matt did? He followed through on his final. He followed through on that. Oh my gosh, did you see what he did? He actually made the 10 serves that he said he was going to make. He actually did what he was going to say. So if you follow through with what you say you're going to do, you keep promises to yourself, and you are consistent with the little details, that's what separates you.
Well, I think it's really interesting, and we were talking about before that Florida down here, and you live here in Miami, is sort of like the crown jewel of American tennis, and was at one point when I was a junior the epicenter of the world. Mm-hmm. Maybe still considered the epicenter of the world. And the track that a lot of junior tennis players go on is they basically play 5 hours a day like I did when I played in the academy, and then just overtrain.
Yep.
And so I think what's interesting, what we're saying is just make sure you're putting put the work in, but put the same amount of work into recovery. So I want to move to that as well, because it sounds like this is a real area of major expertise of yours, especially now working as a strength and conditioning coach and a performance coach for top both college and pro athletes. So what is it about recovery? What should tennis players be focused on? In your opinion, looking at a lot of different athletes, I know you work with other athletes besides hockey players. What do you think tennis players need to work on?
Yeah, so number one is we need to make sure that, I think we like to make recovery sexy, right? It's like, oh, I need to get in the red light. Oh, I need to get in the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Oh, I need to get in the cold plunge. Oh, I need to get in. If we deduce recovery down, how do we fuel your body? Nutrition and hydration, number one.
Okay.
And a lot of us, what we end up doing is we end up sitting here going, I'm just going to take somebody's opinion, or I'm going to take random feelings and emotions as to what I should actually do from a nutritionist standpoint. Or this is what they've always done in tennis, or this is what Djokovic uses, or this is what Nadal uses, or this is what Federer uses, or this is what I need to do. Well, no, actually what we should do is we should actually get so intrinsically intrinsic understanding of your body. So let's actually do cellular micronutrient testing. Let's understand what you're deficient at the cellular level from nutrients that fuel your body. Once we know that, that's when we can start to give you a hyper-personalized nutrition solution. That's when we can start to supplement you the right way. That's when we can start to build in, okay, how much and how many electrolytes do you need? How often throughout the day? If it's this temperature outside and you're sweating this much, this is how much water and how much electrolyte and how much sugar you actually need in order to replace it. This is what we need to do going into a match. This is what we need to do coming out of a match.
Right.
And so if we're not going to that degree or that level, how do we ever expect to be able to actually perform at that level?
Right.
Now, I'm not talking about this for somebody who's just casually playing tennis. Now, I would argue that this would also majorly help them.
Yeah.
But if you're actually wanting to do this thing, if you're actually wanting to make this something for real, then you've got to start doing some of this investment from the cellular testing, the DNA, the epigenetic testing, understand your body at a deeper level so we can get simplified as to what your solution looks like.
Yeah, I always feel like blood, testing, you find out what's going on with your blood is like a P&L for your body. You know what I mean? Like it's just an incredible analysis of what's happening, and without understanding that you're in harm's way, right? So
I'll get sciencey with you for 2 seconds because the blood work for a second is like 99% of blood work is blood serum blood work. And so what you get from your doctor, what you get from all of these online things, it's all serum blood work. So it's looking at what's broken or what's not functioning right. You'll look at red blood cell count, you'll look at liver function, you'll look at kidney function, you'll look at blood glucose levels, you'll look at some serum micronutrients that are just floating through your blood. The downside with this is it's not actually looking at what is inside your cell. And the stuff available, micronutrients, so vitamins, minerals, and amino acids inside your cell are the only ones that your body can use. And so that's why, like when we work with athletes, when we work with our executives and our clients, everything we do is cellular driven. And so that's why we ultimately see different results than a lot of other people get, is because we can get so hyper personalized. So make sure it's cellular testing, and people can do it through Own It or whatever if that's something they're wanting to do. But making sure you're getting cellular testing is critical.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about sleep and recovery. So nutrition, hydration.
Yeah.
We're going to circle back on that, but I first want to go back to sleep and recovery because I really, first of all, this is a personal thing for me. I started waking up at 4:30 in the morning about 7 years ago, which is kind of crazy, but I needed that extra time to be able to really build a business.
Yep.
In that, and also I have a family, and it's, gave me the few extra hours in the morning to do things like meditation and stretching and some exercise. As you know, it's difficult to find that time as an entrepreneur. But on the flip side, I was getting less sleep.
Yep.
How do you find that balance between, the importance of getting up early and having that window of time in a busy life to get those important things you need to get ready for the day, and getting proper sleep?
It's really good. So you asked the question that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
Because it's out of order.
Right.
I don't care what time you wake up. I care what time you go to bed.
Got it. Okay.
So it's like, hey, I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I wake up at the right time so that I can get everything done I need in the morning? Well, it's really hard to wake up at 6 if you go to bed at midnight.
Right.
It's really hard to go to bed at 6 if you're going to bed at 10 one night and then 1 the next. So how do we get a really consistent bedtime?
Okay.
Then how do we create a really consistent night routine so that we prepare for going to sleep, so that we can get the greatest quality of sleep, not quantity, but quality, so that when we wake up in the morning, we're refreshed and we're actually ready to take on whatever it is that we have to take on. So when we talk about it there, and all the data will show, the best thing that you can do for sleep quality, not quantity, but quality, is a consistent sleep and wake time.
Okay.
So we want to get approximately 7 hours of sleep every single night, but a consistent sleep and wake time. If you can go to bed at 10 o'clock and wake up at 6 every single day, within about 30 minutes of each other, 9:45 to 10:15, 5:45 to 6:15, somewhere in there, consistency, you will see a 40 to 50% increase in your sleep quality every single night because you start to have hormone regulation or circadian rhythm regulation. Then we go into, okay, how do we prepare for sleep if we're going to bed at 10 o'clock? Well, 3 hours before bed, no more food, because when we take in food, we've got 400 times more melatonin in our gut than is produced by the pineal gland in our brain. So it actually eliminates the quality of sleep we'll get. 2 hours before bed, let's stop all heavy decision making. Let's stop working. Let's stop trying to figure out what we're doing tomorrow. So eliminate the mental and emotional fatigue that's going to happen. And we put a little net safety net around ourselves, and it's now starting to downregulate.
Right.
And then 1 hour before bed, let's eliminate all blue light. So no TVs, no iPads, no screens, because for every 30 minutes of blue light exposure, it delays melatonin release by about an hour. And so again, affecting circadian rhythm and quality of sleep. Yeah. So if we can just simply do that,
right,
we will see such a massive influx in the quality of sleep we're getting and the feeling of being ready and able to go. And what happens is we'll then be able to wake up refreshed and be able to then start our day strong.
Excellent advice and great tips right there for our audience. Let's circle back to recovery, okay? You touched on a few things, doing contrast therapy and some other modalities that you probably work with pro athletes and even you as a pro athlete had done. So if you were to give, again, a few tips and tricks, top things that people should be doing. Again, we want to do the blood testing. We want to really get personalized.
Sure.
But can't do that with our audience. So thinking about what are the top things that tennis players should think about in terms of recovery? If they were only to do 3 things, let's say, what would those be?
Yeah, so number one is you're going to want to have some type of heat exposure sauna routine. Okay. Like that's an absolute no-brainer. Number one is it's going to eliminate a lot of toxicity within the muscle and cellular bellies inside of anybody. The other thing that you're going to have to make sure you do with that is make sure you focus doubly on hydration. Okay. So we should get half our body weight in ounces of water every single day, no matter what. Half our body weight in ounces of water. 200-pound male, that means I need about 100 ounces of water a day. Okay. Now, on top of that, if you take your body weight divided by 30, that's how much water you need in ounces every 15 minutes of exercise or extreme heat exposure. So for me, I would need about 6.8 ounces of water for every 15 minutes of sauna or heavy exercise or heavy training on top of that. So if I trained for 2 hours, right, and then I was in the sauna for 30 minutes, that means I would have to take 6.8, let's just make an easy number for my math. Yeah. 7 ounces of water, multiply it by 9. So that would mean another 63 ounces of water for the 2.5 hours in which I was training on the court, working out in the weight room, and in the sauna. So that means 163 ounces of water that day to adequately, properly hydrate me.
Especially here in Florida, right? We're Florida tennis, so can you imagine playing outside here in the summer even?
Crazy heat.
With the heat. So that hydration is a really key element.
Yeah, so going back to the recovery. So sauna is one, but making sure that you add that in. Number 2, let's go to the other side, and cryotherapy. Yes, getting in cold exposure. Okay. Cold exposure is probably the best thing that you can do. Even, like, again, you want intra-match, recovery, like have a bowl of ice right behind you, dip your hands in the bowl of ice, which will ultimately take your body temperature down exponentially. So if you literally just do cold exposure, but after any match, being in cold exposure for about 3 to 4 minutes, temperature should be somewhere between that 45 to 60 degree mark. Doesn't need to be in the 30s like a lot of people post on socials, but somewhere between 45 and 60 for about 3 to 4 minutes, which again will help post-training bring that temperature down. But intra-match, throwing your hands in, amazing.
Lots of questions here. Okay. So contrast therapy. Were you referring to sauna then an ice bath, or then cryotherapy, or going hot and cold? And also, what's your thoughts on cryotherapy versus ice baths or cold plunges?
Yeah, I think cryotherapy versus ice baths, no real difference, to be honest with you, in the sense of their benefit.
Right.
Like if we actually got down to the nitty gritties and got really, really into the weeds, we could probably find minuscule benefits to each. But from a big standpoint, let's just get in the cold. Let's just get some type of cold exposure.
Right.
And then when you start to look at it, what's more accessible? It's always going to be more accessible to take a cold shower or get in cold water or whatever than to have a $150,000, $200,000 machine somewhere. So I would always say just, again, the cold component. When you talk about contrast, I do like contrast. I do like going sauna cold. So you do about 15 minutes and then about 2 to 3 minutes.
Right.
However, just the fact that you're going to make sauna a priority every single day and you're going to make cold plunging a priority every single day, you're going to get the benefit. They don't need to be together.
Okay.
If you're able to do them together and you're able to get in there, one cycle through is going to be able to really get you what you need.
Okay, I'm going to squeeze one more out of you. So we got hydration, we got contrast therapy, cold and heat. One more key thing for our tennis players in terms of recovery.
Yeah, I mean, sleep is going to be like the easiest thing that you can control, and we kind of talked about how you can optimize that. But if you're wanting like some type of trick or some type of hack your way, is number one is make sure that after your sauna you're getting in some type of mobility work. Like make sure you have somebody doing soft tissue work on you, from massage to trigger point therapy to full body compression. It could be the Normatec boots. It could be just spending time in isolated stretching. Like something like that is going to give you such a leg up because you're preparing yourself for where you're going next. But again, when you talk about recovery, get your big rocks done first. Get your sleep looked after, get your nutrition looked after, get your hydration looked after, and then everything else stacks on top of that.
Okay. We're coming towards the end of our half hour together. Justin was very kind in saying we can have a few extra minutes if we can. And then he's got a big talk coming up here at this biohacking conference, which is wonderful. Let's circle back on one other thing before we stop, and then we're going to ask, sort of anything to wrap it up. But in terms of nutrition, you mentioned that as a key component for every athlete. And this is obviously a hotly debated topic across the board. So, again, maybe 2 or 3 of your key recommendations. We already talked about hydration, but in terms of nutrition, what are 2 or 3 things that people should be looking for with nutrition?
Yeah, I mean, number one, if your diet has a name for it, it's the wrong one for you.
Okay, right.
So let's eliminate that right away. We know that our body runs on proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. We know that we have to get a combination of all of these in. And especially in athletics, the harder your sport, tennis specifically, we're going to have to make sure we're fueling from a carbohydrate standpoint. So I want you to think about this. Your carbohydrates are like the kindling for a fire.
Okay.
Your protein is the big logs.
Right.
And then your fat is the paper that goes on top.
Okay.
That's how you can start to think about, how do I create a vast inferno and a vast fire inside all the time so I have constant burning energy? You have to make sure, number one, 3 meals a day.
Okay.
Very simple. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. I don't care what time they happen. If you wake up if you wake up and eat a little bit later, that's fine. Breakfast has to be protein focused.
Okay.
Heavy protein. Then it's going to have some carbohydrates and it's going to have some fat. So it could look like 4 scrambled eggs with a little slice of avocado and sourdough bread.
Okay.
Awesome. Then you're going to go to lunch. Lunch should be protein focused, a little bit of carbohydrate, and a little bit of fat. What does that look like? It could be a chicken breast with some rice and some beans. Great. Now we're gonna go to dinner. Same thing, protein, fat, and carbohydrate. The only time that you're gonna start to increase carbohydrate is immediately post-competition, because you need to start refueling, especially in between. And so now if you've got matches, then we can start getting into some of the other things that we're going to start doing, right? Where we've got 2 snacks in between. We're going to make sure we're getting maybe some fruit in those opportunities so that we start to, again, increase glucose recovery periods between. And so that literally just becomes your framework. 3 meals a day, 2 snacks a day, in between breakfast and lunch, and then in between lunch and dinner, making sure they've got your protein, your carbs, your fats. And that's as simple and easy as it gets.
Great advice. I mean, this is so great here. We're squeezing some incredible practical tips for our audience in such a short period of time. So I really appreciate you doing that. Because I know that you're working with some major athletes. So I think our crowd will really love getting this information. So to wrap things up, as an athlete, as a pro athlete, I'm working with pro athletes now, looking at the tennis world, from kind of to some degree, a different lens, right? You don't come from the tennis world necessarily, but you look at tennis and you think to yourself, man, I wish they were doing these things to really improve and up and level up, Mm-hmm. Let's leave our audience with Justin's sort of key, I'd say, learnings from his world, hockey and other pro athletes, of what we can translate into the tennis world for our crowd.
Yeah, so number one is, I think it goes back to what I said, is talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid.
Yeah.
And in order to be consistent in anything, you need to commit.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who say want to do something, they don't recognize the road they're going to have to go on in order to get there. It's great to say, I want to be a pro tennis player. I want to be a college tennis player. I want to be on the high school tennis team. It's great to say those things, but are you willing to do what's necessary in order to be there? That's a different question. And so we need to ask ourselves, are we committing or are we compromising? Because a lot of times we'll say we're committed, but it's really continual compromise in disguise. And you'll recognize compromise because it'll have language like I have to, or I want to, or I tried, or I'll do that until. It's not until you say I'm willing to do whatever it takes.
Yep.
I'm fully committed to this. And you're willing to make the sacrifices necessary in order to make it happen, that it truly becomes inevitable.
Right.
Because consistency will get you paid. And when you start to implement these habits along the way, you start to understand them in a better way, it's impossible that you will not start to see change.
Great advice. Justin, thank you so much. We'll make sure we put in the show notes information how to access your social media channels, your website, which I went through, which is wonderful. Some of the articles you've written are fascinating. I think the tennis crowd always can benefit from information from other sports and other athletes and other strength and conditioning coaches I have the utmost respect for. So, and your background is incredible because you're not just successful in the athletic realm, but you've been successful in the business realm. He has so much more to tell in his story than just the little time we had together. But hopefully we got a few nuggets, a few gems that we can give our crowd. So thanks again, man, for giving so much great information in such a short period of time.
I appreciate you. It was great.
Cool. Awesome, man. Awesome.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Unlock your full potential at the Biohackers World Conference and Expo in Los Angeles on March 29th and 30th. Connect with leaders in health optimization, learn the secrets to longevity, boost your performance, and dive into the latest biohacking and wellness innovations. Don't miss out. Tickets are going fast.